Hey everybody, welcome to our swim webinar. It is January, so that means that it's swim month. So this month we definitely want to emphasize the swim. We want athletes to pay a little bit more attention to it. I know as triathletes, oftentimes we give it sort of third tier treatment, and but it's important. And in January, every January, we really want athletes to think about technique and feeling the water and kind of resetting their stroke. So we like to do a swim webinar every January and sort of remind athletes the basic principles that govern good swim form and technique, so that they can be more engaged with their stroke. And definitely everybody should take advantage of the video analysis that Slack offers, and certainly work with your coach to improve your swim technique, because you have to know what you're doing wrong before you can fix it. But I'm sharing the screen so I think everybody can just see the Google Doc just to sort of drive the webinar. But before we get going, just to kind of set the context, and I have to state some obvious things, but um, so the way you go faster in the water is by reducing drag and enhancing propulsion. It's as simple as that. You can reduce drag by offering a more narrow sort of frontal surface area and a longer one. So think about a rowing shell that a crew team uses. It's long and narrow to cut through the water better. That's what you want to strive for when you're swimming. So the most, hydrodynamic position is, extended, full extension like this is good. So base position is sort of right here. Um, and so that's the uh, re drag reduction side. Good alignment is essential there. You need a taut core, um, and to achieve that long, narrow body line. And then propulsion is influenced by obviously your pull and your kick. Um, the kick contributes, it depends on whether you're sprinting or not, but call it 20-ish% maybe of propulsion. If you're a strong kicker, your pull contributes much more than that. In For many open water swimmers who have a two-beat kick, the kick delivers even less propulsion. So we really want to focus on the pull, especially here, just because it's a little bit more technical, although a good kick is technical also. And we'll talk about that, how to kick well and leverage your kick to drive, generate core power to deliver to your pull. But to start the webinar, let's just go over some um, principles about good swim form and talk about some of the more nitty-gritty aspects of those. And anybody, athletes, coaches, please interrupt me if you have questions or want to discuss something else, or want to uh, tell everybody about an epiphany you had or something in the water. So when we think about form, it makes sense to start with head position. And, the number one issue we see athletes make is they're not looking far down enough. Oftentimes they look too far ahead and their head is out of the water, their crown is out of the water. But um, it's really important to have a good tilt, i.e., one that's not too high. So it's interesting because form goggles, they say, after looking at data from thousands of swimmers and looking at who's fast versus slower, and they say that the best head pitch angle is 33 degrees. So, that's not looking straight down. It's not like you're looking straight down necessarily. Um, it's just looking slightly ahead. And if you get form goggles, it actually measures head pitch throughout a whole swim. So that's kind of neat. But the point is, by having, by looking more down than forward, it positively impacts body position. Because when you're looking up and you're craning your neck, that causes your lower half to drop. So your hips start to drop and your legs start to drop, and that generates drag. We're increasing the surface area that's hitting the water as we move forward. Sometimes, I mean, dramatically. I mean, just think about your legs. If your legs are sinking 4 inches, that could be doubling or tripling or quadrupling the frontal surface area, so the drag. So this is not a trivial thing. So we need to think about head position. And again, most athletes should focus on looking more down than forward. Certainly in open water, we have to sight, and it's common to, have to look forward more, but that's not necessarily ideal from a body position perspective.
Hey, I'll jump in real quick and offer a drill for head position.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys have flat paddles, you can always set it on the top of your head as you take off. If you're doing like 25-meter intervals, because you really don't want to go much further than that, it's difficult. But the force of the water will hold the paddle there as you make the forward progression. And if your head pulls up too much, the paddle will slip off. Um, you can also breathe while you do it too. Like if as long as you're holding your head in the right position, it'll force you to keep your head in that position where it's not tilting up. You're not pulling it too far out of the water to breathe as well. So it
Mm-hmm.
can help you maintain a proper head position during the breath as well.
Definitely. And one thing to think about a good cue is you want your head in a neutral position, more or less. So you want to make that neck long. Um, because just like we don't want to look up, we don't want to be looking like down and burying our head when we come back to neutral position, or and I know that John, you're on this call, and I know we did a CSS test at the pool the other day. But I know that one thing is when you were coming back down, you were kind of burying your head and moving it a little bit. And that can decrease efficiency just because it'll generate drag if you look down, but you also have to turn farther to breathe. So you're spending more time turning your head to breathe and sort of being unstable and then getting your head back down. You're just moving your head too much. So we want to strive for a stable head, quick, efficient breath, breathe low, and get that face back down quickly. Um, so and that harkens back to this concept of a stable head. And when we think about breathing, uh, see this athlete is breathing low. Like this is as high as his head is coming. And you can kind of see there's this pocket of air. So he's breathing literally like below the surface of the water, because when you're moving, there's this pocket of air that develops behind the wake of your head. Um, so that's where we want to breathe. Um, so think about head position, it matters. And like Derek said, that putting a paddle on your head to kind of practice that stability and feel that is productive. Um, and I'm gonna kind of just go back. I like how this individual swims, especially for triathletes. So you kind of just look at his sort of his head position. He's looking right about 33 degrees. I mean, he's a good swimmer. You can kind of see, turning, keeping that head low, and then coming back. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions on head position?
I just add an additional drill. Uh, if you like with the paddle, that one's a great one. I use that all the time. If you have fins and put your fins on and just practice like rotating in the water, and then you really want to just like keep your head straight with your shoulders and just like turn your head so that you can breathe and then focus on calmly putting it back, looking to the bottom of the pool.
Mhm.
You're gonna feel same with like your paddle falling off. You're gonna feel if your head and neck are in alignment with like your shoulders. And if you're not fully rotating, you're not gonna be able to breathe. So it's definitely overemphasizing. Like you're not turning your head with it, you're turning your entire torso. but
Hmm.
it's a good like balancer to kind of feel if you're in like full alignment or not.
That's a good point. And that sort of reminds us of this point right here. When you're turning to breathe, you want to kind of follow your shoulders. Um, so, rotation happens, obviously hips, shoulders, and also the head. Because what this is doing is it's going to make it so that you don't breathe late. So it's not like you want to turn and then it's like you're turning your head with your shoulders. You're getting that breath. So, I mean, if your hand is a lot of athletes when they breathe late, they're still breathing and their hand is already like past here and entering the water, and that's not what we want. Um, so, you know, breathing is inextricable with head position, and you want to exhale your air before you turn to breathe. Obviously you don't want to inhale and exhale when you're uh, out, when your head is out of the water. You want that air gone and then turn and just breathe in, then back down, steady exhale of air out of the nose. That's how most athletes should be breathing. Um, but so those are a couple drills and thoughts about head position. And
Conrad, can you talk
yep.
a little bit about bilateral breathing versus unilateral breathing, and the benefits of both? I mean, if you look at like Katie Ledecky or even like Taylor Knibb, they're unilateral breathing when they're going hard. And if you like looking at their races, they're just breathing to the right side. What are your thoughts on whether it's good to practice bilateral breathing?
I think it's good to practice bilateral breathing for sure. Uh, in in your normal swimming, especially warm-ups, cool downs, and easier swimming, bilateral breathing is beneficial, I think, especially for adult learned swimmers because you're trying to develop proprioception and for a similar reason as to why like dabbling in other strokes could be productive. It's like learning how to breathe to both sides is beneficial because it can expose certain inefficiencies in your stroke. Oftentimes, if we only breathe to one side and we start out breathing to one side when we start learning how to swim, oftentimes you over rotate to that side, and there are some inefficiencies that one develops. And bilateral breathing, it can smooth out the stroke. It's good to do it. And it's nice because you become more versatile. So in open water, if it's more convenient to breathe to one side, like if somebody's smacking your head on one side, you can just sort of breathe on the other side. That's the main reason. You can say that if the sun is in your eyes on one side, it's nice to breathe to the opposing side. There, it can be helpful, but it's definitely the case that if you're breathing in like a 3-1 pattern, you're going to not get as much oxygen as you probably want. So breathing to one side every stroke is a good it's fine, certainly fine when you're racing or doing a hard interval. Um, but I'm a big I do think that bilateral breathing in practice is good. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, you're breathing to the right, 3 strokes breathing on the left, 3 strokes breathing on the right. It could be, 20 strokes to the right and then, 20 strokes to the left, or going down one length, you breathe to the right, coming back the other, you breathe to the left. One other thing that I've definitely found with a lot of swimmers is that they end up swimming faster when they're breathing to their weaker side or non-preferred side because it goes back to that over rotating thing. And that's a weird phenomenon that I've noticed. So it's good to hone that and also learn breath control. That's that breathing in a 3-1 when you're warming up, cooling down, and as much as you can in the main set can help that. But again, when you're racing, you want to be comfortable and you want to get in that oxygen. You want to get in that air. So breathing to one side is good. But everybody's different. So Anybody have any other thoughts on breathing? Nope. Then, so moving down to core, this concept of, if you think about the core, just think about like your chest, kind of torso, hips, glutes. It's important to think about this because oftentimes athletes they don't engage their core, and it's not like you need to be flexing your abs and squeezing your glutes as hard as you can, but you want to think about having a taut core. So because that maintains that long, streamlined body position. And it prevents you from noodling around in the water. Because think about if you bend at the waist, which is pretty common, athletes sort of bending at the waist and their legs sort of seahorsing across the pool or through the water, that's just not efficient. To float well, you need to engage your core and activate those glutes and hamstrings to keep your legs up. So it goes back to this concept of, you've heard of pressing the buoy or kind of pressing your chest into the water. Basically, what that's doing is encouraging your legs to come up, and so that you can achieve a better body position. I really like the belly button to the spine sort of cue that can help. And I know that was it like envisioning that there's like a coin in between like your glutes, like your butt cheeks, and squeezing that can help kind of lift up the legs. That's another cue, but the idea that you want a taut core, because you do want to flex your core. I mean, we want to integrate the core into our swim stroke so that we can generate more power when we pool. Because coupling that rotation with the pool, it couples that power. So that core rotational power with the pool, just like a baseball player, when they're swinging, they lead with their hips and swing the bat, and that generates way more power, than just standing there and going boop, and not moving your hips. It's like silly. It would be ridiculous to see somebody doing that. It's the same idea in swimming. If you're just there and you're going, that isn't productive. But you want to, sort of start that hip rotation and then pull at the same time and finish your stroke. So that leads us to this kind of core or hip rotation and the timing of it all. And it's obvious, but the hips kind of drive rotation of your core. But it starts from the kick. And I don't necessarily think that triathletes should strive for a 2-beat kick, but I do think a 2-beat kick is very useful for learning how to sync up your kick to drive rotation and how that rotation relates to your pull. And what happens is, you basically kick right before you pull on the same side. And that's what this swimmer is doing right here. So for example, he's about to pull on the left side. So he's gonna kick down with his left foot. He's gonna drive those hips up, and he's gonna pull. You kind of see like kick down, hip rotating as he's pulling. Like that enables him to pull with so much more force than he otherwise would. So it's definitely worth practicing this because it can be a game changer. Even if you swim with like a 4-beat or a 6-beat kick most of the time, having the ability to do this, it really highlights how you have to couple core rotation with a good pull. So again, this is worth like this is probably the most important thing from the webinar in my mind. Like athletes who realize this, it can kind of transform their stroke, and they can expend much less energy. They're not flailing about. Like every movement actually has a purpose. That makes sense.
One thing I'll say, and I'm kind of jumping ahead. Do you want to go back to the video real quick?
Yep.
I'll show some. I want to get it when his hand's entering the water. So earlier you mentioned about staying long and taut, and he always has one hand out in front of him. And a
Yeah.
lot of athletes, a lot of new athletes, what they do is they start pulling before that next hand enters the water. You want to maintain that long position by always having that hand in front of you, and you don't start that pull until the fingertips hit the water. And basically, you're just switching back and forth. And that's what this gentleman's doing here.
It's a sped up catch up drill almost. It's not exactly
Exactly.
catch
Yeah.
up, but
Yeah.
it's a sped up catch up.
It'll feel like catch up, but like once you are moving and you're in the rhythm of things, it'll help with timing too with the kick, because then you're not just like pulling when there's nothing happening. You're being deliberate about that pull starting exactly when you're switching to the other side of the body, because then not only is the pull happening, but that rotation is also happening at the same time.
Right. Whoops. Yeah, that's a good point. Front quadrant swimming, it enhances stability. It decreases drag, because you're longer and more stable, less likelihood of the hips falling. It also just is less exhausting than like a shoulder driven stroke where it's like a zipper sort of. But and everybody is a little bit, the idea is you want a hand out in front of the head at all times. Yeah, that's a good point. And one other thing though, when we think about rotation, we want to be careful that we don't over rotate, because a lot of newer athletes, when they start second, everybody can see it's just fine, but oftentimes we're like, you have to rotate, but then athletes end up over rotating. And when athletes over rotate, a very common occurrence is crossing over center right here.
Well, I was just trying to finish
And
this webinar.
when that happens, you end up scissor kicking your leg,
Okay.
play,
I just want to go right now.
and that generates a lot of drag. So you want to be careful about not over rotating. You want to find that happy median, and it's going to depend on how tall you are, your center of buoyancy, etc. Anybody have any other thoughts about rotation or hip how to integrate like sort of the hips or shoulders into swimming?
One drill that I found helpful for figuring out what shoulder muscles and how wide your hands should be is doing deck ups. So when you're getting out of the water out of the deck, making sure you're not if you put your hands too narrowly, you're not going to be able to pull yourself up. But if you widen your hands and then pull yourself up, that's the type of width we want for that diamond pull position. And that's a good way to figure out, all right, like I need my hands to be wider, not only for the entry and the catch, but also so I can get the most propulsion and the most strength possible.
Yeah. And here, let's see if I can pull this photo over to this screen. Well, I'd have to, one sec. Like to your point here, it's kind of what you're talking about. Like if you were to pull yourself out of the pool, your hands would kind of be here, they wouldn't be straight. They wouldn't be super far out. They certainly wouldn't be narrow, but like they'd be right here. You'd leverage your lats to pull yourself out. So that's a good cue for sure.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That's super helpful.
It also teaches a little bit of core engagement because you can't lift yourself out of the pool with just your arms. Obviously, most of the work is coming from the arms, but you do have to brace your core. It does help cue the core a little bit with the deck ups.
Yeah. Here's another good. When we think about, I mean, if you're pulling, like this person can pull themselves, this is a decent position for pulling yourself up. out of the pool. This is just, you're not going to generate a lot of force when you're like this, when you're reaching out here and trying to pull backwards. You're also going to end up, again, fishtailing in the water. You're going to be squirming because you're not pulling straight back with a stable body position. So, be careful with rotation, call it, 30 to 45 degrees of rotation. Your shoulder should certainly come out of the water, but you shouldn't be totally on your side, and you have to be careful with that lead arm. You want it in position 11, just out in line with your shoulder, and sort of like here. I mean, again, as soon as you're crossing over here, you introduce just a cascade of just form flaws that are going to generate drag. Anything that breaks this long, narrow body line is a form error, and it introduces drag. And water is over 800 times denser than air. Like an additional 2 inches of drag can slow you down by a substantial amount. I mean, just think about swimming with your toes pointed versus your toes just flexed in the shape of an L. We don't want that. So, and then, so thinking about propulsion, I know we sent this around on Slack, and I've shown this so many times. It's in the book, but this is a good way to think about how to get your hand in that catch position. So when we think about the sequence, obviously you enter, and you can just use kind of him. He enters fingertips first. He reaches out as he rotates, and what happens is you reach out straight in line with your shoulder, and then you have to drop your hand into the catch position. And what we're trying to do there is get this hand and forearm vertical, or mostly vertical, as far out kind of as our flexibility allows. And your ability to achieve an early vertical forearm, this is what we're talking about, a forearm vertical early on in the pool, in the catch and pull phase. That's what we're striving for. And what we need to do here is reach out and make sure that our fingertips are below our wrist and our wrist is below our elbow. I know Brendan Ford, he always talks about drawing a line from your shoulder to your fingertips. If you draw this line, your shoulder or your elbow needs to be above it. So we're basically creating a triangle here. A huge form error is this elbow dropping. And when that elbow drops, a bunch of bad things happen. So if the elbow is down here, it means we're not gonna catch water with our forearm and hand. If you're not catching water with your forearm and hand, then you're not pushing water back, or you're not pulling yourself over your arm forward. And you can give up 50% of potential propulsion just by kind of dropping your elbow. So, you need to be patient when you're reaching, and, anchor that hand and forearm, and then pull straight back. And so this is kind of more of an achievable, see, so you could kind of see his, he's not necessarily pulling. He doesn't necessarily start his pull. I'm not gonna be able to do that until his elbow drops a little bit, just because there's a lot of stress if you're internally rotating your shoulder really far out front. So this is Grant Hackett, and I always like to show the video, but he has one of the most famous early vertical forearms. You can kind of see, I mean, look at his hand forearm right here on the right. It's perfectly vertical, 5 feet in front of his head. And then he pulls back and he generates a lot of power. A lot of surface area is pulling straight backwards. We want to think we're doing this, but very few of us are going to be able to just do this because you need good shoulder flexibility. But this is the idea of what we're striving for. But you can swim very fast and not have one, a catch and pool as ridiculous as that. I mean, look, this one is more obtainable. You can kind of see, this athlete, his arms probably, it's at like a 45-degree angle before it starts pulling back, and that's fine. We just need that elbow to be above this fingertip to shoulder line right here. And then this is a good cue. A few athletes went to a clinic the other week, and Mike Bottom told them to pop their elbow up, and after they reach, and a light bulb went off in their heads, because it's like, oh, like I need to, and it's not like we want to actually pick the elbow up out of the water, but it's just like a cue. Like you reach out, and then oftentimes the act of dropping our hand and forearm down, just we automatically kind of drop our elbow. But if you think about like popping your elbow up while you're doing it, your hand will end up potentially dropping down into a good kind of vertical position. You kind of see right here, it's like you see Grant Hackett, his elbow doesn't drop. It's almost like he's popping up his elbow. He isn't physically popping it up, but it's a way to kind of, it's almost like popping it up, thinking about popping it up just is really forcing down your hand and forearm more aggressively, because you're not going to generate propulsion unless that hand and forearm are mostly vertical in the water. And if you think about it, if you're pulling back and your hand and forearm aren't close to vertical, you're really going to kind of like lift your front end up out of the water, which will drive your legs down. So it's all connected. But the cue that we're looking at here is, it's like you're reaching over a physio ball or over the barrel. All that means is you're keeping your elbow high and dropping your hand and fingertips down. So really think about that when you're swimming next time. Things like catch-up drill can really highlight this well.
Another drill to kind of help understand if you're dropping your elbow. One of the things that we did with Mike Bottom, he had these paddles that was on your palm and it came all the way down to your elbow. And if you didn't get your arm vertical, you were basically just like sliding your hand back and not actually getting a good pull. So it was helping to force that elbow pop. Obviously those paddles are not at like a local pool, or I don't even know if you could, I'm sure you could buy some form of them. If you hold
Denise makes them.
Okay. Or if you just like hold a kickboard or something long, that might be a little awkward, but something flat that you can just like practice with all the like once in a while and just work on pulling it this way. If your elbow drops, you're just gonna slide backwards and you're not gonna get any force in your pull. So it's just all about like, even if you're holding onto it with a fist, just popping it back, you'll move forward. Also just like in the water floating and you're just sculling. So you're just pulling your arm and your elbow and your arm never come past your elbow and you're just kind of swimming. You're not going anywhere. It's going to be the slowest drill you ever do, but that can help just like feel what that pool is trying to tell you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And here's sort of this is Fenice's.
Okay. Yeah.
This a while. It just sort of forces your hand and forearm to be sort of in work as one, Fist drill is good also for this. It just forces you to think about your forearm. But the athlete who I know somebody posted on Slack, and his finger, like his palms would like go like this, I think, when he's pulling. This could be a good apparatus for him too. Is this what Mike Bottoms looked like?
No. So they were an actual paddle. So think of like a regular paddle on your hand, and the plastic piece came flush and was like a flat piece down. I don't think I have a picture. I might have a picture of it somewhere, but
It's probably
so
like the older older version, maybe.
Yeah, so it wasn't just your forearm that was pulling. It was
Remember
like a
these,
full
like
solid piece. Similar to that. It came all
two
the way down to your
poster
elbow
things.
though. Hmm.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
I like the elbow. Yeah. If it goes the whole way down, it's even more
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah, because you couldn't move your wrist at all.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was
So
helpful.
good. And then one last piece of this, like propulsion, is the importance of finishing your stroke. This is another huge error. So when I think about errors that a lot of adult learned swimmers make, the obvious one is like crossing over, which can be caused by just not rotating well or reaching out and crossing over center, which then leads to legs splaying. They go hand in hand. Um, the elbow dropping is another big one. And also many athletes just don't finish their stroke. So, they'll pull their hand out of the water near their belly button or something. But you want to finish your stroke. I mean, if you just look at, he's pulling sort of past his hip. Look at this athlete. He's not pulling out of the water here. The most of the propulsion is going to happen from here to here. So you don't want to pull your hand out of the water too early.
And when you're doing that correctly too, you'll notice it because you'll feel your lats engage more.
Yeah.
And if you're already not pulling all the way through, it'll definitely fatigue. So it's something to focus on during all your swims.
And there should be a sixth phase of the stroke, and it's the press. So you kind of see when we think about there's this big focus on just pulling straight back, which is good, but athletes what that does is it causes them, if they're not thinking about what they're doing, they're just going to pull their hand out of the water as soon as like it starts feeling weird down there. But it isn't just like a straight pull out of the water. It's like a pull and kind of like a press past your hips, like you're brushing your hips. And that lengthens the stroke, and it also helps with timing and maintaining a good rhythm. Um, so definitely think about that. And then moving on to hand entry, the enter fingertips first. We don't want to be entering thumb first near your head, because oftentimes when athletes enter thumb first, they're kind of entering near their head, and they're entering. So when they enter and they reach out, they're going to generate drag, and then it's also you end up applying a lot of stress to the shoulder, and there's a heavy correlation between athletes who kind of enter thumb first near their head and shoulder impingement. I can think of two athletes this year who have experienced that, and shoulder impingement, and both of them enter like that. Um, so
And if you reach too far, then your body will tend to flatten out and you won't get that rotation. So I always tell people use the cue of like entering between your elbow and your wrist. So when your
mhm,
hand enters, it should be somewhere in between like that area, probably closer to your wrist for most people.
right. That's good. Yeah, sort of like at wrist length. And again, we talk about position 11. I think Jenna's dad kind of coined this phrase, but it's it is so important not to cross over center when you reach out. Um, because that's what it really, you want to maintain that long, straight body line. And again, if you're crossing over center, you're introducing momentum sideways, and that's gonna break that long top body line. Um, so, but that covers
And
most of our.
yeah, go back to the video real quick too. I also want to talk about the depth of the hand entry. So a lot of people think, so this guy, his right hand enters a little bit deeper than his left. And you can actually, when you enter the water, your hand can actually enter 8 to 12 inches below the surface of the water. Where like a lot of people think it needs to be right at the surface. If the slower you're going, the deeper it can actually enter. Because if your hand's like 12 inches down and you're moving a little bit slower, it's going to balance out the rest of your body.
Yeah.
So one thing to think about too, like so when if you're moving slower during a warm up, you can see where your hand's entering and aim for about 8 to 12 inches below the surface of the water. But yeah, you'll see like his hand, especially his right hand's a lot lower than his left. Um,
Yeah,
Probably just
armpit depth is sort of a good way to think about it.
hmm
But yeah, you're right. His right arm is entering deeper for sure, and that's because he's breathing on that side,
Yeah.
right? Um, so,
And
but it
the other
shows you
thing,
how. Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, yeah. So like when your hand's that low, as soon as you start that catch and that pull, it starts immediately rather than if you're at the surface, you have a lot of lag time between that.
Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of this is going to depend on shoulder flexibility also. Like Grant Hackett, he can reach out more shallowly and get that hand and forearm vertical in the water and pull straight back with his, with his upper arm just near his ear. Whereas because he has a lot of flexibility in his shoulder. Um, whereas most of us, we just can't pull this off. So our pull is going to look more like this. You reach out, get that vertical, and then pull. You can kind of see the importance of finishing your stroke down here. You can see that he's doing that. Like this, it's not common. Like he has a good stroke, I like his pull here. Um, what else? Does anybody have any other questions about the swim stroke or have anything else they want to talk about? Nope. Then we can move on to some additional discussions. Derek, did you want to talk about masters? Who wanted to talk about that?
Yeah, I guess I'll probably talk a little about it, but I think I'll go with the benefits and some of the drawbacks of masters. But I think the obvious one is you always have a coach on deck that can provide in the moment feedback, which is super valuable for swimming, especially if you are an adult learned swimmer. Having feedback in the moment to correct the form issue is going to be pretty valuable. Additionally, I think having members that are similar pace in your lane or even right next to you is super valuable because if you are making an adjustment to your stroke, you should be able to see it in real time. I use the example like if you're swimming the same pace as the person in the lane next to you and you start to make an adjustment with your arm, your stroke or even your stroke rate or whatever it may be, you should be able to see you progress or fall back from that person. Um, Accountability is big too, and I think there's two pieces of the accountability. Master swims are generally set at certain times, so you have to show up at a certain time, so you have to go. And there's always a coach on deck, but the third thing is the other people around you as well. So just like, the group workouts that we all do in Nashville and Cleveland, when you're showing up and there's other people around you, you can't really just jump out of the pool when you don't feel like it. So you're kind of forced to commit. Um, and I guess talking about motivation and fun, it keeps things engaging when there's someone else there. I know when I swim solo, it's a little bit more challenging to stay motivated. It seems like time stands still, but when you jump into an hour or an hour 15-minute long master swim, it goes by a lot faster. So the drawbacks, though, I think generally a lot of classes are about an hour long. Some master's programs have a little bit longer sessions. So if you are doing a long course triathlon, you're limited to a shorter swim set. I think most people probably get in between 2,500 to 3,000 yards if you're in a master's class. Where if you're really putting in the volume, you're probably swimming 4+ K per swim. Um, the other thing is it's like how specific is it to the race distance and the event? Uh, that's masters swimming is really catered towards pool swimmers. I know there's a lot of masters classes now that have open water swims and things like that. But if we're doing shorter sets, it might not the fitness might not be the right stimulus for long course triathlon. However, I think most athletes are going to benefit from swimming with the Masters either way, even if the sets are a little bit different. But you always want to consider, like, if you're going to a Masters as you approach your A race, like, are you getting the volume that you need? And are you getting the intervals that you need to meet the demands of the race? And that's what you want to think about. Um, Anything else, coaches?
Yeah, it's also very coach dependent. So if you have a master's, if you have a great swim, like I know Ashley in the Nashville area is fantastic. She's very good at balancing the people who want to do pool swimming versus triathletes and coaching them differently. But with masters, make sure that the coach is worth it. Because some coaches will sit on the pool deck, just write up the workout on the whiteboard, and just sit there and kind of clap along with you, which is not what you need. So make sure if you do sign up for masters, do some research on whether the coach is valuable, because that's one huge benefit of a masters, but it can also be a con.
And even the whole the ecosystem of the pool as well, like who's all in there. Like at Centennial, you have people that are Olympians all the way to beginner swimmers, where some masters programs might just be a lot of beginners. And if you're trying to improve, like it might not be the right atmosphere for you as well.
And one final benefit of masters is if it's really hard, if your pool has limited pool hours or lane lap swim hours, so there's a lot of aqua fitness classes or the hours that they do have, it's very crowded. Masters can be beneficial because it reduces the number of people in your lane and also make sure that they're going at relatively similar paces to you, so you're able to get in a better workout. Even if the workout's not necessarily tailored specifically to triathlon, you don't have to navigate people around you when you're in a master's class, or shouldn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just echo kind of what you guys already said, but it's cool just to try it out, to see it, to swim next to somebody, to swim with people who are similar pace and do the same workout. You'll get pushed. It might not be as much volume as you want, but if you're in a phase of training where, it's okay if you're getting 2,500 instead of, 3K, 35K. It's definitely worth it to try out and see if you like it. It might not be like an every swim type of thing, but if it's like a couple times a month, um, it's definitely fun. And you can always solicit feedback from your lane mates too, or like, hey, what did you see that was going well? What do you think my kick looks like? Because you might have no idea, and you think that like a certain drill is going great, and they're like, hey, you look like you're a fish out of water. So if you have the opportunity and you are not going to a master's program, I do recommend just trying it out. A lot of times you can get in like the first practice for free as well, just to try it before you pay anything. So it's definitely a good option.
And then how about form goggles and EO power meters?
Yeah, so I can start. You guys can kind of chime in whenever you want to, but there's a lot of newer technology coming to the market within the last couple of years in the swim department. A lot of it super helpful. Obviously, as triathletes, we're all data nerds, so it's fun to see everything. The big overarching caution with data in the pool is over analyzing things to the point where you're not actually putting like drills into motion. But all of these things, so like form goggles, EOS, the My Swim Pro, what is it called? The third one down there. But they're all nice to have
Edge.
at some point just to kind of like check yourself. So I know form goggles have been on the market. There's also the Finis goggles. They can either show a certain set basically in like your line of vision within the goggle themselves and kind of say like what's next, or like it'll do the same thing as a watch of like marking off your time. But the really cool part of it is it'll show your live pace. So if you're used to swimming and you're using like a clock or your watch and you just see like you're coming in on 100 on like at like a 130, but what you don't know is that middle 50 is like super slow, or you're powering off the wall and then like really petering off before you get to the other side of the wall. You'll be able to get that live feedback and just kind of understands like how you're pacing within a certain set or like an open water swim specifically. So it's beneficial in like an open water swim or a race simulation, because you'll be able to know and like be able to pace yourself like that. I personally would say, yes, it's useful. However, don't underestimate the fact of like learning to pace and how it feels on your own. Because there's always going to be times where like your watch breaks or you don't have technology where you can know that. And if you don't know how that feels, same with, when we're biking and you want to know what like a zone 2 versus zone 4 feels like. So form goggles are pretty cool. You guys can chime in if you have anything else to add. Otherwise, I'll pop over to the EOS.
Yeah, I just want to talk about some recent advancements with the form goggles that are next level. So like I showed earlier, this up here. So this is a screenshot from the the app. So it measures what's going on. Sort of like, I guess there's an accelerometer in here, and it can measure what your head is doing. It can measure distance per stroke. It can measure stroke rate in real time. It can measure how fast you're moving from breathing down back to neutral. So, and it's capturing these metrics and so it can diagnose form flaws, which is pretty cool. The other big deal is that you now, and this is kind of insane, but in Training Peaks, so as coaches, we don't build out workouts in Training Peaks with the actual like workout builder for swims. We type out the sets and everything because it's just too much to build out, and we don't want athletes being distracted, and it's just, you want to be engaged with your stroke. But what the form goggles will do now, it will look at the text in what we write out into the workout description as coaches, and it will actually like tell you what to do in real time, like in the workout,
That is
on
the
your
next
goggles.
level.
So
Wow.
that's next level. So it's
Yeah.
leveraging AI, and it's kind of nice to have that there if you don't want to bring a note card to the pool. So
Mhm.
that, but that was recently launched. I think it was launched like this month or last month or recently. So that's kind of wild. Form, I think, captured a lot of the market share in the smart goggle space, and they're investing a lot into it. And it's, I think it's pretty cool, but we don't want it to be a distraction either. You have to be engaged with what you're doing. So to Alex's point. And then EO, you
Hey
want to talk about?
Conrad, I got a
Yep.
oh, hey, I got a quick question. Anybody use those form goggles in open water? And if so, what have they been like?
I know Jen's on the call. Have you used them in open water yet?
Yeah, I have. Um, you can set them to see whatever you want, and I like them because you have something to focus on. Like if the water's pitch
Mhm.
black, I can see, okay, I've been swimming for 20 minutes. I don't think it was great at picking up how far I had swam in terms of accuracy, but it was just something there. But you can set it to see whatever you want it to see. I love my form goggles. Can't imagine swimming without them, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, in open
And then
water, I can
another,
imagine it would be useful seeing stroke rate. That could be a nice thing to see. Um,
And
but
Jen,
Yeah.
how long do the goggles last? Like, how long have you had your pair, and does the rubber, like, at what point does the rubber start to dry out?
I've had mine just over a year.
Okay,
I haven't had any issues with mine yet. So I don't know, but they're a year old now.
sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you use the form goggles like in the races?
yes,
Nice.
you can.
last time I saw them too, they look pretty bulky. Do you guys notice anything with that? Like as far as being like popping out of the side of your head a good bit.
Yes.
They look silly. They're big. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
notice it as something sticking out, but they do look kind of funny if you're looking at someone wearing them.
Yeah, the field of vision is not ideal. It's not great in them. I found, and I can't push off the wall with a lot of force because they pop off my head personally. I've tried, like you have to tighten them so much and then your eye sockets just start to ache. I'm working on that, figuring out how to address that, but um, that's more of a personal problem, probably.
Um, okay, so I'll quickly go through EOS. This is another new technology that's on the market. It's basically a little sensor that just attaches to your palm, and it can measure a lot of pretty cool things in the water. So it'll give like your stroke rate, your like force field. The cool part, my favorite probably, is like the velocity. So it'll capture when you are most propulsive and least propulsive in your pool. And so it'll give you that feedback of, you know, if your catch is weak, or you get to here and then your finish is pretty weak, like your velocity will drop. So it'll cue you to work on certain things like that. It'll also measure your stroke pattern. So it'll get into like your consistency. I think that's my next picture, Conrad, if you want to go down a bit. Maybe it's not. Maybe the next one, maybe, but
That's it.
oh, there should be four. Oh well. Um,
These are the same, actually, I think.
okay. Well, I can go back and edit it before we send it back out. But it'll map like your consistency on where your arm is coming every stroke of the swim. And then the stroke phases, let me see if I have it up really quick. But the stroke phases will show you like where, kind of similar to like the velocity of like where your hand is coming in the water. I used these at the swim analysis we did with Mike Bottom, and it was pretty darn cool to see like what my hand was doing and where I was pulling well and where I was pulling not as well. So it's a pretty cool tool to use. Again, it's not something to use like all the time. You want to kind of use it, do some drilling with it, and then like almost retest yourself later. You have to like start the EOS before you swim and then stop it, and then it captures it and sends it to your phone or whatever app you're using or whatever device you're using for the app. So um, definitely a cool feature to use and to kind of gain insight to what somebody who's watching your swim could tell you. But this is like the added part of the velocity and the propulsion. It's really pretty cool. It'll
So
also kayak Conrad's over the sweeping part, so it'll track like that's what it is doing with like the consistency and the stroke path of like where your hand is going. And so if you're a swimmer that's pulling way far out, or you're coming in here and crossing over center, this will tell you that as well. Where you're like sweeping and doing that, you know, the old S curve swim that some of us were taught back in the day. And now it's more of just like you want that straight propulsion back. So
Got it. So this looks
it's a
like you're
pretty cool
crossing over
tool.
just a hair.
Yeah. So cross over a little bit, and then that one's pulling all the way out and then down by your hip and to come out, and it's doing a little swirl at the bottom. So that's pulling around, and then your arm's coming this way instead of like straight through. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in knowing. I mean, it kind of depends on shoulder flexibility too, but I'm curious what they think the ideal path would be. Like what maybe it has to relate to force field and everybody's different, but
yeah, I think the most important part would be optimizing like your velocity through the water.
mhm.
And then just making sure that you're not going to get hurt with your stroke path. So that's a good point because everybody's will be a little bit different, but um, it was a very, very cool tool, and I am not one for swim tech. So it definitely impressed me.
Cool.
But I know that I think what would be kind of cool, we can kind of talk about this later, is if like for swim camps, we were to get a couple of these and let people try them, like all of our different techs that we're talking about right now, not just like one EOS, but
Yeah, for sure. I'll bring
Um,
goggles to Cleveland.
there we go. I'll briefly touch on my swim edge because it kind of mirrors EOS, but I want to kind of frame it in the context of like we have the data, but what do we do with it? And Alex already kind of alluded to this earlier. It's like, we if we have the data, you can measure it. Don't you can't let it consume you because we have to know how to dissect it. And like Conrad and Alex said, like if your path is different, like if people might have different paths in the water with the EOS, and you got to be able to measure that for probably a long time to know where you need to make gains and how to analyze it. So my swim edge, I didn't put any graphs in here because I met the founder last weekend, and he reached out to me before, and it's a device that sits in your back, and what it's measuring is the rotation. And I thought it was interesting because it knows the balance of your body, for every stroke, and it can measure propulsion as well. However, it's like my point is, it's like, what do we do with that data? Because there might be a little bit of an imbalances between the rotation of a stroke. If someone has a little bit different of a pull, like there's even Olympic swimmers that have like that get kind of gallop stroke where they're not going to be super balanced out
Most of them do.
rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like we don't need a perfect, left to right balance anyway, per se. If you're sprinting, maybe it's better for long course to have that balanced stroke. But the point is, if we have the data, we got to be able to understand how to use it to get better with it as well. And I think the power meter, like the EOS, is pretty powerful because it's measuring both hands, where the my swim edge is not really measuring the power per se, but it's just measuring the rotation from one side to the other. So I'll leave it at that. I'm curious to have another conversation with the founder. He really believes in it, but I'm not convinced it's going to be super powerful. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that come out with different technologies, and it's just a matter of time of like collecting the data and with multiple different athletes, and having them collected again to see where the improvements are made, and how to utilize the data to make the improvements.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I definitely want to loop it back around here and say you don't want to lose the forest for the trees. And a lot of athletes have the mentality of like, I'm not gonna leave any stone unturned. Meanwhile, like they're missing out on the actual meal, like everywhere. There are McDonald's everywhere. So, like you need to get in the water and just swim. Like if you're swimming 6K a week, like it doesn't matter all of this other stuff. It's we want to really emphasize the importance of just getting in the water, feeling that water, um, identifying stroke flaws and then addressing them. But it's not like just getting form goggles it will transform your swim. You have to actually get in the water and swim. Like it doesn't matter if you have an EO or like at the end of the day, you have to get in there, spend the time, build swim fitness. So there are no shortcuts in that regard. So we don't want to, you know, lose sight of the main thing. The main reason triathletes are not they perform relative to like the best swimmers in the world, they perform and cyclists or runners in the world, they probably perform worse relative to swimmers than they do cyclists and runners just because they're just not swimming enough. So don't do not skip your swims. Certainly we want to make the most of our time in the water, and that involves being engaged with your stroke. And so we don't want to get too distracted by all of these cool pieces of technology, etc.
Yeah, focus on the 95%, not the 5%.
Exactly.
And like in kind of articulated very well. Like we had to just do the work, and it's just funny. I look at Slack, and people are looking for little hacks here and there to recover fast or whatever. And at the end of the day, if you're putting in the work and you're sleeping well, you're gonna recover well. But and when it comes to swimming, you just have to swim a lot. And if you're swimming 6K a week, and you want to improve, swim 12K a week. And that's what it boils down to.
Right. For sure. It definitely helps. 12K you will see substantial gains. 12K compared to 6K compared to 20K. And unfortunately, you do have to do the work. So, but that's what we do. We do the work. Anybody have any closing thoughts or questions or anything?
One final plug about not getting in the water, but is a legit way to beef up your meters without in a supplement to the water is the Vasa Swimmer. I love mine. It is not a replacement for the water. Rob Sleemaker, who's a friend of the team, he very much acknowledges that to get faster in the water, you do need to swim in the water. But the Vasa Swimmer I have found is an excellent supplement because it allows you to focus and build up the muscle memory of proper form while still mimicking the path of your stroke and being able to look at your stroke out of water so that that can translate into pool speed.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to try a Vasa Swim Erg, we have one at our office/lab. You can check out our Instagram. Chris was on it in one of our most recent videos, and we were sort of talking about the swim stroke. But it's there for athletes to use for sure. And for January, Vasa is, since they know it's swim month, they're offering a pretty enormous discount to working triathletes. It's an individual code. So you have to just reach out to me and I'll connect you with the COO there, and he'll give you a code for a lot off. It's I believe it's 35% off for January. So that's nuts. So let me know if you want that and I'll connect you.
Hey, Conrad, real quick, last thing I was just thinking about, and I don't think we covered it yet, but and this may be something to send out to everybody, just a list of things, but like strength training drills to get stronger. I know when I started swimming, I felt that muscle fatigue very, very quickly, and I've done some strength training to help with that, and it's gotten a lot better, and plus more time in the pool. But are there specific exercises, that would be good for people, especially wanting to, if you are putting the volume in, wanting to balance that with building solid strength too?
Yeah,
I can
that's
take
important.
that, Conrad. One couple strength drills that I really like are the biggest one is lat pull downs. Just regular lat pull downs to engage the lats because that's going to be a primary muscle mover in the water. Other ones are going to be lateral side raises. So with dumbbells, using the lateral side raises and going straight out to the side and straight forward. And then the last one that I really like is YTWs, where you're putting your chest onto a Swiss ball. And the first movement, you're bringing while lying down, you're bringing your arms up to the side, just like making a Y with your arms, bringing it out to the side to make a T, and then starting down here and going out to the side to make a W. That's going to hit the rotator cuff, pretty much all of your shoulder muscles, as well as the upper back. Those are the key muscle groups for a stronger pull. So there's some really good ones to not only for prehab, but also to strengthen your stroke.
Thanks.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I can do a video, like if you all want a video, I can make a quick video on that, just to show you those movements.
Yeah.
And those can be done at home too. You don't have to go to the gym for those, with the exception of the lat pull down.
Let's do it
for the gram.
Maybe an upcoming webinar will be strength training for endurance athletes. Need to have that. Cool. I know it's 1:12. It's been an hour, 12 minutes. Thanks for hopping on, everybody. Hopefully this was useful. And yeah, keep the conversation going on Slack.
See ya.
See you guys.
See y'all later.